Hey guys, welcome back to the Chelsweets kitchen. With all the frenzy around Pokemon Go lately, I've been reminiscing a lot about the good old days when I used to play Pokemon on my Game Boy Color. And it kind of inspired me to make this cake today, which is going to be a Funfetti Pikachu cake. So we're going to start off with our Funfetti cake layers, which we're then going to decorate with a vibrant yellow buttercream. And we're going to color some fondant to make his cute little face. And then we're going to stick some Pikachu ears on top. So it should be a really great cake. We're going to start off by frosting our cake layers and applying a crumb coat, and then we're going to get started on the fondant work. We're going to start with a little dab of our buttercream on our cake base to secure the cake layer. So now that we have our first cake layer down, we're going to apply a thin layer of buttercream. And then we're going to add some sprinkles in between each layer too to give a little bit of texture and also just to keep this cake exciting. We'll repeat this process with our remaining cake layers. So keep in mind you don't need very much frosting for your crumb coat. It's just to really get all those crumbs trapped under, so when you apply your second layer of buttercream, you'll have a really clean look and you'll be able to get a very smooth finish. So we're going to put this into the fridge and we'll grab it in a few minutes. So now that our crumb coat has chilled and is firm to the touch, we're going to apply our second layer of buttercream. Alright guys, so now that we have our frosting all smooth, we're going to set this aside and we're going to start coloring our fondant. So we're going to be using black fondant to make Pikachu's face, and we're also going to be coloring some white fondant. So we need to make his little red cheeks, so we're going to start off by coloring some white fondant red. So I use Satin Ice, which in my opinion is just the best tasting fondant, and you can definitely make your own fondant as well. But it's pretty labor intensive and I just have not mastered that yet, so I still buy mine in tubs, but if you make your own, power to you. So first I like to kind of work it around to make sure that it's a good consistency. And then I take some gel food coloring. I use AmeriColor, but you can use whatever you prefer. And I put a nice big dollop in the center. And now get ready because your hands are going to get colored from this. So I put in quite a bit, because I want this to be really vibrantly, cartoonishly red. So it's going to literally like start oozing out all over my hands. This is probably going to look like a crime scene, but that's okay. We're just going to keep working it around till it's evenly distributed throughout the fondant. And this takes a few minutes. It's a labor of love. So I kind of like to roll it. I feel like I have half of the food coloring on my fingers, but I like to kind of pull it apart. And it starts to get a little bit tacky as you're rolling it. So sometimes I let it rest for a little bit and then I go back and keep working the color through. So like this is getting pretty sticky. So I'm going to set this down for a minute and let it firm up slightly, and then I'm going to keep working it. I'm also going to rinse off my hands really quickly. So now that I've cleaned off my fingers, I'm going to get started on the yellow fondant, which we'll need for Pikachu's cute little ears. So we're going to use a decent amount for this because his ears are going to be pretty tall. I think that should be enough. And when you are working with fondant, it's really important if you have any leftovers you don't use to make sure you seal it really tightly and get all the air out of that. So I'll start by working it through again. My hands look pretty terrifying right now, but we're going to keep going. So our red now is much less tacky. You can start to work it through again, and we'll add in a little bit more red food coloring. Alright, so that's looking good. It's still pretty sticky, so we're going to let it sit. Now that we have all of our fondants the right color, and I've taken out some black fondant, I'm going to sprinkle just a touch of powdered sugar onto my countertop, because I don't want the fondant, once I roll it out, to stick to my countertop or whatever surface you're working on. So you don't need much, you just need a very light dusting. Alright, so we're going to start with Pikachu's ears, and I'm actually going to zoom in so you can have a close-up of what I'm doing, but I've cut out of literally a piece of cardboard the shape that I want Pikachu's ears to be, and we're going to use that to make sure that when we cut our fondant, both ears are uniformly the same size. I also have a larger cookie cutter circle for Pikachu's little cheeks, and then I have a slightly smaller circle cookie cutter for Pikachu's eyes. And then of course the little white dot that goes inside of his eyes, we'll be using this tiny little press cutter. So I'm going to zoom in so you guys can see what I'm doing. So now we're going to start rolling out our fondant, and I like to lift it up and kind of spin it each time I roll, just to make sure that it's not getting stuck to my surface that I'm working on. So we're going to cut out our first ear right now, and you can use whatever cutting tool you think works best, but I like to use a pizza cutter. It just works really well and does a really nice job getting clean cut. I like to transfer whatever fondant I'm working with onto parchment paper as it dries and kind of firms up, just so that you know that it won't stick when you're going to place it on your cake. Now we're going to make Pikachu's eyes. Now that our Pikachu face is all ready to go, we're going to press it onto the cake and apply the ears. So to secure Pikachu's little ears here that we have here, we're going to use some wooden skewers. And just like that, we caught a Pikachu. Thanks so much for joining me today. To see the recipe for this cake and all of my other sweets, you can visit Chelsweets.com. You can also see more of my creations on Instagram at Chelsweets. Hope to see you guys soon!